Before names or maps, an island slept within the silver breath of the sea.
The land was music before it was memory.
They called this place Coabana, Quababo, cradle of spirits and gentle rain. Life flowed simple and sacred, bound to earth and stars alike.
Every drumbeat was a heartbeat of the island itself.
But destiny sails with storms, unprocured, unseen, uninvited, unstoppable. The silence of centuries shattered beneath foreign wings of cloth and fire.
He thought he found paradise, yet planted the seed of empire. A cross was raised, not as prayer, but as possession. The song of Coabana fell silent beneath steel and disease. Freedom vanished, replaced by the cold rhythm of chains and guns. Gold and blood flowed together across the ocean's endless mouth. Faith became a fortress, and the fortress a prison of souls.
They brought bodies in chains, but their spirit could not be caged.
Hope survived in whispers, in rhythm, in hidden fire.
The empire's sweetness was carved from the sweat of the enslaved. Power wore silk, but its hands were stained with centuries of silence. The island bowed beneath empires that mistook faith for dominion. Even stone wept here, the sea remembering what men forgot. On parchment, they drew power, but never the heart they conquered. The land whispered its pain into every sunset. Change was coming how? The storm had learned to speak. Faith met fire, and fire remembered the name of freedom. From silence rose a cry that would echo through centuries.
Freedom bleeds before it breathes again, but it always breathes again.
When suffering endures too long, even silence becomes revolution. The empire trembled made. Its sweetness turned to smoke. The sea bore witness blood. It had seen conquerors come and fall. And through every wound, the island still remembered its song. This is Cuba, Hurezi, the heart that refuses to surrender to time. Empire arrived with silk sails and a hunger that knew no end.
Faith and fire walked together beneath banners of the crown.
An island of peace became a field of conquest and mourning. Every mark was meant to claim the soul of the land itself. From across the ocean came bodies, turned into currency and labor.
Their shadows merged with the islands, sorrow and strength intertwined.
Sweetness became the taste of suffering in an empire's mouth.
Whips cracked louder than prayers, and heaven remained silent.
Where chains could not reach, rhythm carried the memory of freedom.
Faith became resistance, a whisper stronger than steel.
Wealth gleamed, while hunger slept in the shadows beneath its doors.
Every grain of sugar held a human story, unseen but unforgotten.
In fire, even the enslaved learned to shape their own defiance.
Luxury was built on the silence of countless broken voices.
Lullabies became shields against the empire's cruel dawn.
The world began to see Cuba not as home, but as prize.
They built stone walls to guard gold, not humanity.
The empire traded everything any except mercy.
They gave him a Christian name, but could not erase his soul.
Thunder became the language of the forgotten.
Even the sea grew weary of carrying stolen dreams.
In the hush of night, freedom rehearsed its first words.
Nature itself rose, as if to cleanse the island's pain.
Through their songs, the island remembered its pulse.
Freedom dreamed in whispers between rows of sugar.
One spark in the dark can outshine 1,000 torches of fear.
Revolt is born not of anger, but of memory refusing to die.
The Empire hunted shadows nice, yet shadows learned to fight back.
Every revolution begins with a promise, spoken softly in the dark.
The mountains waded through, patient, eternal. Even faith trembled before the weight of power. The crown fed its empire, not its people.
Sometimes fire is the only language the world understands.
They built their cages with their own hands and still dreamed of sky. Every storm in Cuba carried the scent of change.
Heaven was painted bright, but earth remained in shadow.
The empire's cruelty hid behind words of gratitude and grace.
Even death could not divide the enslaved from their dignity.
The sky began to write what history would later confirm.
Spirit and rebellion danced under the same sacred light.
Even the youngest could feel history turning beneath their feet.
The empire prayed for victory, while the people prayed for dawn.
No empire lasts forever, but every empire believes it will.
Even laughter carried secrets of rebellion beneath its melody.
Some chains broke not by mercy, but by fire.
Stories became the only homeland that could not be taken.
Nature has no masters, Engao. It remembers justice in its own way.
The price of defiance was blood, but silence cost the soul.
In darkness, even a single breath becomes resistance.
Beauty and pain coexisted, Aaron. The twin faces of empire.
Order is what tyranny calls peace.
Life continued, fragile but unbroken beneath the Empire's shadow.
Every whisper held the weight of centuries untold. Faith without courage became the Empire's silent ally.
Beneath beauty, unrest simmered like fire beneath glass. The code of revolt was written in rhythm, not ink.
Freedom's path was carved through mud, blood, and faith.
The island began to reclaim its name through flame.
Revolution is born in tears before it roars in triumph.
What once bound them now became their weapon.
They carried no flag, only faith and fire.
Power fears the night when truth walks unseen.
The island's heartbeat grew louder than the Empire's guns.
In the hush of dawn, the island breathed clarity Clinkry. A promise, yet unspoken.
Hope met strategy in the hush before dawn.
Freedom learned to walk barefoot through the enemy's land. Even in death, the dream refused to vanish.
Every triumph in Cuba carried the taste of loss.
Gold fades, but memory remains. The Empire answered fire with fear, and fear with silence. History was not finished. It was only pausing to breathe. The land itself seemed to listen for the next heartbeat of revolt.
Even ruin can be fertile when hope survives.
Power often mistakes quiet for peace. The Empire's night was ending, though it did not yet know.
Cuba was learning to turn pain into fire.
Faith became a weapon, sharper than any sword. In every age, one spark lights the world anew. Freedom demands all play, yet gives back eternity. Empires end, not with thunder, but with unraveling threads.
The sea washed away emblems, but never the pain beneath them.
Strategy became prayer, phrase. Precision born of desperation.
Faith bent rules when compassion demanded it. Cuba's spirit began to walk upright
through its wounds. Every departure was a promise of return, for both sides.
Every ripple is history, learning to move again.
From ruin, Cuba began to remember its strength.
The future often grows from the ashes of despair.
War ends, but its echo stays in every home.
Peace returned, fragile as foam upon the tide.
Rest was illusion. Rebellion only waited for breath.
2 words carried the weight of a nation unborn.
Each bell toll reminded the island that history listens.
Another century prepared to awaken beneath lightning.
Symbols endure until truth tears them apart.
Songs travel faster than ships, they carry revolution.
Ink became rebellion long before gunpowder did.
Change walks unseen, but its footsteps shake empires.
Every revolution begins as a vision no storm can drown.
And thus began the long cry of Cuba vie for freedom, for light.
Peace was fragile, and justice still slept beneath the cane.
One man dared to speak aloud the dream that history whispered.
Faith, ink, and courage became the trinity of revolution.
Freedom must begin in the heart before it conquers the land.
Viva Cuba Libre!
From one shout was born 1,000 beating hearts.
Liberty took its first breath beneath ringing iron and hope.
The island learned again how to roar. Every drop of rain baptized the birth of a nation.
Freedom's first steps were taken barefoot through blood and smoke.
He spoke not as ruler, but as father of a wounded island.
The revolution was fought in kitchens and in hearts alike.
Even the smallest hands carried the weight of tomorrow.
Music became the language of resistance.
Even the stars seemed to guard their restless dreams.
Power stared into defiance and saw its own decay.
Mateo. Love remained when every flag had fallen.
Ink, once again, carried the hope of nations.
Freedom and death became indistinguishable beneath the storm. Nature joined the rebels, thunder as their drum, wind as their cry.
Even silence can shout when hearts refuse to yield.
Freedom traveled hidden, yet unstoppable.
Their courage fed an army as much as bread did.
Tattered cloth became the new scripture of the people.
Mercy survived even in the language of war.
He sought allies, but found only echoes across the sea.
Empires never listen until the earth itself shakes.
Cuba learned the art of vanishing to stay alive.
Bravery knows no age when the soul's born free. Freedom always writes its name in blood before ink.
She fought for the unborn generations, watching through her eyes.
Tradition became armor, and song became sword.
Paper could not stop bullets, but it could give them meaning.
Power plans in darkness, but revolutions breathe in daylight.
History returned, not as echo, but as storm.
They carried their cause above the waterline of despair.
Loyalty was the final weapon they could not confiscate.
The father of Cuba bore its burden alone in his silence.
Even defeat has its own kind of glory.
The will to begin again was Cuba's greatest inheritance.
Revolution always eats its saints before its enemies.
He died not as leader, but as symbol, immortal.
Martyrdom became the island's second skin. Ideas, once born, never surrender to silence.
The chains were lighter, but they were still chains.
The empire's shadow grew thin, but it still lingered. Children of fire learned to whisper in history's ashes.
He dreamed not of revenge, but of redemption through love.
His pen was a torch carried into the next century.
Words became weapons sharper than any bayonet.
The spirit of Yara had returned, the meaning, reborn in every heart.
Tyranny never sleeps when truth begins to wake.
From exile, he would teach Cuba how to dream again.
He turned pain into poetry, and poetry into purpose.
Words marched where armies could not. The revolution waited for its next heartbeat.
He came home as wind, gentle, invisible, unstoppable.
The sons of Yara were reborn in every generation.
Freedom rode with them beneath the rain of bullets!
had become the soldier he once wrote of.
He died like a verse, completed, brief, eternal, aflame.
A nation knelt, not in defeat, but in promise. Liberty was no longer a dream. It proved it was destiny.
Empires destroy what they cannot understand.
Suffering moved as one, the march of endurance.
No chain could bind an idea that crossed through water. The crown guarded silence, as if it were victory.
Even exhaustion can sound like triumph when the heart believes.
Cuba learned to survive through the art of rising.
A nation in birth must first pass through fire.
Even empires tire of their own reflection.
The eagle began to circle the wounded lion.
Help was coming, but from whose heart? And at what cost?
The calm before destiny often wears the face of peace. In one heartbeat, history changed its flag. Tragedy became pretext, and pretext became invasion.
Empires write justice with ink soaked in ambition.
Freedom arrived wearing a foreign uniform. The old empire collapsed into the arms of the new.
Victory smiled, but its eyes held another story.
Cuba was free man, yet still not its own. On paper, independence was declared. In truth, postponed.
The island changed masters, not destiny.
From ashes, the heart of the island still burned pure.
Freedom had arrived, but sovereignty was still on its way.
We won, but not yet. Victory without power is only another name for waiting.
The sea had seen it all. Conquest, rebellion, rebirth.
At last, the island stood, wounded but unbowed.
Freedom, fragile yet alive, began to bloom again.
The dream of Yara had become a nation at dawn.
Cuba stood alone, young and trembling, but alive.
Words became law, and law became hope reborn.
For one fleeting moment, the island exhaled peace. Independence wore a shadow, shaped like an eagle.
The people celebrated, yet history watched with caution.
May this freedom finally belong to us.
Cuba was reborn, but the struggle was far from over.
A nation found its name again, but not yet its peace.
The cry of Yara would echo through every generation to come. Freedom wore its chains beneath silk and ceremony. The eagle spread its wings across the newborn republic.
Independence came with an asterisk, written in another nation's ink.
Industry bloomed, but its roots fed foreign hands.
Labor replaced chains, yet the rhythm of servitude remained.
The island danced to music it did not own.
Glitter and hunger shared the same address.
Cuba became paradise for everyone, except Cubans.
Prophets spoke louder than patriotism in gilded Havana nights.
In the countryside, dreams cost more than bread.
The stars shone, but the soil belonged to someone else.
Beneath music and smoke, anger waited its turn.
Youth became the pulse that history could not silence.
Freedom on paper meant nothing beneath boots and batons.
Faith replaced bread, and hunger replaced hope.
While the poor starved, Havana glittered like a mirage.
A nation divided between heart and survival.
Power changed its uniform, not its gaze.
They had fought for freedom, diligente, and watched it sold. Truth was printed small between the lines of pride.
Even laughter tasted of struggle.
Democracy became theater performed for foreign applause.
Ambition slept behind calm eyes, Myrna, waiting its moment.
The empire's shadow moved in rhythm with the music.
Empires change, but exploitation keeps its name.
Every generation must fight the same ghosts anew.
Hope returned in whispers, disguised as plans.
Freedom's ink bled again into Havana's streets.
He promised order, Infanil, and Brauf's silence.
Every dictator begins by calling himself savior.
Peace under boots. The empire reborn in Cuban uniform.
When truth sleeps, propaganda sings.
Power always finds comfort in familiar company.
The earth itself began to rebel in silence. The revelation of hunger had begun again.
Even faith needed permission to speak.
Fear became the new national anthem.
Words, too, were outlawed when they remembered freedom.
The city sold its soul for currency and applause.
Havana's beauty wept behind painted smile.
When truth is banned, youth becomes its messenger.
Power looked eternal, too. But so had every tyrant before him.
One man began to dream of cutting history's chain.
Justice returned dreaded, this time with teeth.
His words struck harder than bullets.
Hagen Gullets!
Revolution, once again, found its disguise in silence.
The more they hunted, the more ghosts they created. The fire had found its flame bearer.
Down with the tyrant!
Fear began to crack beneath the weight of courage.
Freedom, once again, was baptized in blood.
The mountains were waiting Pang, as they always had.
Tyranny loves mirrors more than truth.
Failure
only taught them how to rise again.
The fire of Yara had never gone out, only changed hands.
The island was about to remember its own heartbeat.
Destiny sometimes waits across the sea, wearing exile's mask. When conviction met compassion, revolution found its twin flame.
The plan was fragile gone, but belief made it indestructible.
Hope set sail from exile's shore toward history's storm. Arrive, not with triumph, but with survival.
Freedom often begins with defeat's ashes on its face. The heart of Cuba welcomed its sons once more. From the earth itself, rebellion rose again.
Tyranny always mistakes cruelty for control.
Every revolution begins with one choice. Enough.
Hope becomes strength when shared beneath storm and hunger.
The lawyer had become the soldier of destiny.
The people had found their mountain, their voice, their flame.
Words once censored now echoed through the valleys of Cuba.
Empires grow old, and their shadows cannot hid forever. From hidden valleys, hope began to take shape in human form. Freedom moved quietly, step by step through sacred earth. Words of courage floated through the forest like prayers. Compassion and discipline forged revolution's new heartbeat.
They learned to make warmth from will alone.
No habló de victoria, sino de la dignidad renacida.
Joy survived even when bullets did not.
Every step cut deeper into the Empire's illusion of control.
The people became the revolution's unseen army.
Truth lived where propaganda could not reach.
Even paper carried the scent of defiance.
Every revolution begins in ink before it bleeds in fire.
Courage wore dresses and carried baskets of hope.
Freedom learned how to fight sleep and to win.
Nature herself seemed to sing with the rebels that day.
He saw not conquest, but redemption for a wounded nation.
Even far from the city, they danced with its heartbeat.
Tyranny always mistakes destruction for control.
The smallest gestures became the architecture of freedom.
Discipline grew where despair once lived.
The revolution's weapon was clarity, not chaos. Voices in the static carried more power than bullets.
Power grows desperate when truth begins to echo. The land itself became their camouflage, their ally, their prayer.
The storm that was Cuba began to move downhill.
While the rich danced, the mountains re-rate history.
Denial became his last refuge of power.
They no longer hoped to survive. He'd they vowed to triumph.
From these mountains, a new Cuba would soon descend. From the mist, courage took its first full breath.
Silence became their armor, patience their blade.
Revolution began not with bullets, but with literacy and light.
The jungle itself joined the cause, whispering through leaves. Power dropped fire from the sky, but missed the heart below.
Compassion endured where medicine could not reach.
Hope was waterproof in the hearts of the faithful.
Leadership was forged, not in comfort, but in the storm.
The people carried the revolution between hunger and hope.
Every movement of the enemy was written in the mountain's breath.
Two minds, one destiny claimed, bound by vision and trust.
The jungle roared back for every century of silence.
Mercy became their most radical weapon.
The spark had found its flame.
Rumor became gospel, and gospel became uprising. Urban hearts began to beat to the mountain's rhythm.
Power builds walls when truth begins to climb.
Faith once again stood quietly beside rebellion.
The mountain began to walk toward the capital.
Liberation walked barefoot, but tall.
The truth had already chosen its heroes.
Cuba was speaking again, in its own voice.
Every footstep glowed faintly with the promise of dawn.
Tyranny trembled, not from fear, but from disbelief.
Every victory fed the next heartbeat of hope. The revolution had become a song too loud to silence.
The world began to look where the empire said nothing.
The image of truth is stronger than the weapon of lies.
The fire leapt from the hills into Havana's heart.
Unity rose from chaos, precision born from belief.
The doctor became the scalpel of revolution. When fear shifts sides, empires crumble.
Steel bent before conviction.
Victory began to sound like music.
Power felt the chill of its own ending.
Even tyrants know when history has closed the door.
At last, the island exhaled.
Every step carried the weight of 400 years.
Joy was louder than gunfire that day.
The mountains had spoken, and the world listened.
Power had vanished in the night, like smoke.
1959, the year the island took back its breath.
Freedom had a face again, a teleword, smiling through dust and triumph.
The doctor of the poor now stood beside destiny itself.
The poet's prophecy had come home to live.
He spoke not as conqueror, but as the island's echo. The revolution was not a victory, it was a resurrection.
At last, Cuba belonged to itself again. Justice began where chains once ended.
purity returned to the wind, if only for a while.
The leader became student once more, learning from the people.
Education became the first revolution of the mind.
Memory itself became a weapon against forgetting.
The soil, at last, returned to those who worked it.
Freedom walked out barefoot, blinking in sunlight.
The promise of equality hung bright in the morning air.
Victory meant healing, not forgetting. The dreamers already feared what power might cost.
He spoke like a man, speaking to destiny itself.
Every light that night carried the name Cuba.
Evil heaven paused to listen.
They thanked the land that had sheltered them in struggle.
Joy moved faster than reconstruction.
The face of revelation became its conscience.
The victory was not the end. It was the beginning of duty.
The land itself seemed to breathe again.
The spark had become fire, and the fire a new dawn.
In their laughter, the island heard its future speaking.
Reunion is the quietest triumph of all.
Freedom's altar was built from sacrifice, not stone.
History often begins when the victory parade ends.
Peace is never the end of revolution, only its reflection. The sea watched, remembering every banner that came before.
Healing began with hands, not speeches.
To teach was to rebuild the soul of a nation.
The revolution returned the island to its rightful owner. Oh, its people.
Every victory must learn to write its own story.
Not all eyes saw liberation. Some saw loss.
Land became the alphabet of dignity.
The island rediscovered its rhythm of joy.
As long as years gone past.
Justice sometimes walks in borrowed halls.
At last, every corner of Cuba sang the same.
He knew victory was easier than keeping its promise. The revolution settled into twilight Sacy, bright, uncertain, alive.
Unity felt like a miracle, earned through pain.
Viva Cuba Libre!
Freedom, once a whisper, now thundered in every voice.
The island had awakened, but history never sleeps.
From these mountains to this moment, Cuba had found itself.
Every sunrise since carried the memory of that day.
Victory was not conquest. It was return.
Where it all began, the earth sighed in light.
Symbols, once forbidden, now flew free above their own sky.
The revolution became silence, and within silence, eternity.
From chains to song, Cuba had become its own light.
Every face, every name, a syllable of freedom. He saw the future waiting for him. Uncertain, radiant, real.
The revolution was over, and history had just begun.
The morning after victory tasted like sunlight and disbelief.
Hope wore olive green and spoke with fire in its voice.
He measured victory by the work still undone.
Freedom without justice, he said, was no freedom at all.
The voice from Havana now spoke for every forgotten valley.
The revolution began to teach before it learned to rule.
Knowledge became the second liberation.
Healing the body became healing the soul of the nation.
Discipline was compassion, written in practical lines.
The soil, after centuries, belonged again to those who bled for it.
Letters replaced chains, the right word. The alphabet of freedom grew strong.
Power changed hands, and silence became justice.
The old Havana died quietly under the weight of reform.
Empire never leaves. It retreats with its teeth clenched.
A small island had dared to say no to the world's giant.
He spoke as David to a Goliath still watching from afar.
Freedom always costs more once you truly own it.
He called them comrades, not employees, and meant it.
A new color entered the island's light, crimson resolve.
The eagle turned its gaze back to the island it once claimed. Where diplomacy failed, shadow began to sharpen knives.
He warned that freedom, like fire, must be defended or die.
The sound of defense became the rhythm of fear.
Patriotism had no wings, a desire, only duty and resolve.
He believed discipline was the truest form of love.
Two revolutions shook hands across oceans of ideology.
The island chose alliance over isolation.
hunger arrived, disguised as punishment.
Defiance became a hymn, stronger than bread.
Freedom for sale always smells of smoke and deceit.
He smiled like a man who had outlived too many empires.
History prepared its next invasion under the mask of liberation.
He knew the storm would come failing and waited in calm.
Faith whispered louder than fear that night.
The Bay of Pigs became the Bay of Reckoning.
Every grain of sand resisted in the name of sovereignty.
The revolution fought as one, farmer, student, soldier.
Victory arrived, soaked in salt, blood, and pride.
The invaders came as liberators and left as proof.
Cuba had faced the giant and still stood.
He warned that victory without vigilance becomes illusion. He said, "The people are the fortress of this island."
The alliance deepened, and so did the fear of war.
Education became the new flag of loyalty.
The Cold War found its heartbeat in the Caribbean. Friendship between revolutions meant defiance between worlds.
The island became the eye of humanity's storm.
He believed deterrence was the price of survival.
The age of innocence ended in black and white. The world came one heartbeat away from silence.
History balanced on a horizon of fear.
Every mother feared the doll would not return.
He refused surrender, even to annihilation itself.
The island waited, breath held between fire and mercy.
Two men.
For one fragile hour, reason defeated apocalypse.
The island had survived the world's own madness.
He promised to keep Cuba whatever the cost.
The revolution had entered its long twilight of endurance.
Peace was fragile, stitched together by fear and faith.
He saw Cuba not as island, but as idea.
Defiance became devotion, unbroken and proud.
Revolution turned from fire to structure, from dream to daily work.
His eyes looked beyond victory, toward new storms abroad.
Cuba began rebuilding with both hands and faith.
The new generation was raised on courage and caution.
ordinary life returned, quietly, defiantly, gratefully.
He knew survival would be the island's greatest revolution.
Cuba had lived and changed the balance of the world.
The revolution was alive, imperfect, unstoppable.
Light and blood, the two halves of its eternal flame.
Comrades in history plin, divided only by destiny's road ahead.
The storm had passed, but its echo became Cuba's song.
Peace, for now, slept lightly on the island's chest.
Cuba's light reflected across the world, unbroken, alive.
Faith endured even beneath the banner of reason.
The next generation began where revolution left off.
He had turned survival into legend now, and legend into burden.
The revolution of light and blood had written its name in eternity.
The island learned to keep faith alive with color and song.
Restless hearts rarely stay in paradise for long. Leadership meant feeding hope when bread was scarce.
Work became prayer, industry a hymn to endurance.
They grew trees where others had planted war.
Solidarity spoke through grease, laughter, and shared labor. The revolution retold itself every night, frame by frame.
He carried Cuba's dream beyond its shores, chasing justice abroad.
He knew every departure carried both pride and prophecy. The island wept for its conscience in foreign soil.
He spoke few words, Lenin. The grief itself became a monument.
Even in death, his fire refused to fade.
The march of survival replaced the march of war.
Ideals turned into lessons for a generation unscarred by battle.
Cuba learned to breathe again, breastfeed, slower, deeper, wiser.
He smiled, not as hero, but as father of persistence.
The land endured everything: drought, war, embargo, and still gave life.
Amid isolation, the island kept its rhythm of defiance.
Cuba had survived its baptism of light and blood, alien, unbroken.
After fire and triumph came the long winter of endurance. Revolution grew older, Suming, proud, hungry, and unbowed.
Scarcity taught patience. Dignity fed on hope alone.
Work became a prayer for survival.
Faith was now printed on every textbook page.
The The island's heartbeat synced to the rhythm of a distant empire.
Between two oceans, alliances carried both food and fear.
Solidarity became survival, painted in red and steel.
Ideology became inheritance, passed like a lullaby.
The world beyond the embargo lived only in sound.
Children learned the map of isolation by heart.
Martyrs replaced saints in the altar of memory.
He built dreams brick by brick against the storm.
Comradeship was measured in laughter and shared scarcity.
Even in silence, heart refused to obey.
Every stitch was defiance against emptiness.
Words became shields against a world that turned its back.
They came to witness the myth Bravelo and found endurance instead.
Conviction hardened where compromise had drowned. Nature and politics shared the same fury.
Solidarity rose from debris, radiant and weary.
Cuba exported its cure instead of its chains.
The island's compassion crossed oceans of war.
Even oceans could not drown belonging.
Revolution's heart beat, strongest far from cameras.
Every victory abroad was paid in silence at home.
The friendship of necessity echoed like a promise half kept.
He spoke for the voiceless with Hain, and the world could not look away.
The island heard itself roar through static and applause.
Joy returned, uninvited but unstoppable.
Exchange became heartbeat brevi. Fragile, rhythmic, necessary.
Two worlds kissed for the sake of endurance.
Cinema became both memory and illusion.
Truth survived between lines of state-approved light.
Even silence had its own revolution.
Preparation became ritual, a hymn to vigilance.
Work was worship at Kuwait, labor the new gospel.
Sweetness still, the island's burden and blessing.
Electricity flickered, but resolve did not.
Ambition tested the limits of endurance.
Honesty became the revolution's rarest triumph.
The people still believed Punkalope, in him or in hope itself.
visited the island like a gift from cold stars.
Knowledge grew in defiance of isolation.
Cuba's heartbeat mixed rebellion and elegance in one pound.
Exile of duty ended in a homeland still enduring.
Every embrace rewrote the cost of conviction.
Glory never arrives without its shadow.
Time began to weigh, even on belief.
Ideology and art danced a careful duet.
Conviction aged, but never wavered.
Faith survived on repetition and ritual.
All empires retreat, even though built on friendship.
Freedom split into two shores of the same longing. Love survived embargo and distance alike.
Endurance became elegance in motion.
Leadership meant confessing truth and still believing.
Youth built the future out of debris.
Cuba remained a whisper the world could not silence. He looked at the horizon as if searching for old friends.
The world that had sheltered Cuba began to dissolve.
Joy abroad sounded like thunder over fragile soil.
Departure became destiny's final punctuation.
Certainty vanished faster than ink could dry.
He read the obituary of his strongest ally in silence.
The machines kept turning out of habit, not hope.
Faith re-entered the conversation. History had paused.
Survival learned to glow softly in the dark.
Imagination became the currency of hope.
He led not by abundance, but by persistence.
Community replaced wealth as the island's true treasure.
Memory became both comfort and compass.
Isolation had become identity, unyielding as tide.
Even in scarcity, knowledge refused to dim.
Joy proved immune to politics.
Ideals weathered, but never washed away.
Art endured as the island's quiet defiant.
Work continued, because it must often, always.
He prepared the island for a dawn no map could predict.
The Cold War left, but its silence remained.
Time could not conquer what faith had built.
We are small, but we are strong.
Even ruin can hum when it remembers its rhythm.
The island began, once more, to teach itself hope.
Work became music. Survival became song.
Even static could carry harmony if one listened hard enough.
Cuba lived between what was lost and what refused to die.
Through hunger and hope, the island endured.
The Cold War ended, but Cuba's fire did not.
Isolation became identity, all defiant, luminous, complete. He had kept the island breathing through silence.
Life, stubborn as ever, pedaled forward.
Survival itself became a kind of victory. Cuba stood, battered but beautiful, on the edge of history.
Even decay had learned the rhythm of rebirth.
Music carried the weight of what words could not say.
Cuba, a movid, survivor of storms, singer of silence.
The Cold War ended, but the heart of Cuba kept beating on.
After empires and storms, the island woke to itself again.
Poverty shared became resilience disguised as joy. Survival here learned to dance instead of crawl.
Dreams stayed loyal, even when the lights went out.
When bread was scarce, melody fed the soul instead.
Time in Cuba refused to move forward. Cloutier. It chose to sing.
Work remained worship beneath skies older than sorrow. Even hardship learns rhythm on this island.
Art survived every embargo soul. It was the last revolution.
He spoke not of victory, but of endurance.
Light replaced applause as the island's language of love.
Hope whispered softly through salt and laughter.
Memory had become the island's greatest export.
Survival learned the grammar of compromise.
The world rediscovered what Cuba never forgot: soul.
Icons fade, but belief renews its color each dawn.
Music remained the nation's unbroken prayer.
His words still carried more weight than gold.
New rhythms grew on the roots of old revolutions.
The children of sacrifice learned to smile without permission.
The voice of history finally allowed itself to rest.
Continuity replaced change, like a heartbeat repeating its vow.
The impossible began to look almost possible again.
Bridges whispered where walls once shouted.
The future arrived in pixels and tears.
Time laughed, saying, "I am never finished here."
Every dream now belonged to those who stayed.
The island became both museum and miracle.
Joy had become resistance refined into art.
He captured not faces carved, but faith frozen in time. Even now, nature rehearsed the sound of endurance.
Cuba never stayed broken for long.
A generation laid its myth to rest, gently, without regret.
The revolution became inheritance.
The earth itself bowed farewell to its storyteller.
Every lyric now belonged to memory.
Light remained calm, because love had learned endurance.
Even ruin can shimmer if faith stands behind it.
Words returned to do what guns could not.
Happiness found its shape again in simplicity.
Every sunrise still felt like revolution's child.
Legacy walked quietly beside the living.
Cuba bow, small.
Art redrew what borders could never erase.
What is revolution?
It is remembering who we are.
The ocean repeated Cuba's story endlessly, in salt and sun.
Old and new danced their quiet duet across time.
Identity here was never performance, it was pride.
Even hardship shimmered when seen through rhythm.
Freedom of thought returned.
Slow, fragile, real.
Art and wind conspired to keep the soul breathing.
Beauty here was not luxury, and it was survival.
History glowed quietly where it once burned.
Cuba spoke again, fluent in resilience.
Existence itself became revolution's final act.
Time bowed to grace, just for one song.
The new generation filmed what the past had dreamed. Renewal here is never sudden, Brown, only faithful.
The island remembered its dead,
by shining brighter.
Farewell became the longest note in the nation's song.
Peace, too, can learn to fly.
Every bulb a memory, every glow a promise.
Cuba, eternal, carved in rhythm and rain.
Generations changed, the heartbeat did not.
The island's story was never war, Kagikul. It was becoming.
From conquest to revolution, from silence to song.
Time forgets empires, but remembers rhythm. Memory itself had turned into light.
Cuba endures epic, not as history, but as heartbeat eternal.